Loud enough? Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. Waheguru. So we're going to start off just with an ardas and some simran. So I invite everybody to just close your eyes. And we do this ardas, we do this simran, not as a ritual, but as a way to bring our mind inside this room. So we've brought our body inside this room, but the mind can often be wandering in different directions. So as we start, acknowledging that you're here right now, and why are you here? You're here, Maharaj Di Kirpana, to connect with your Guru. And we're here to receive, to listen to the Gurmat Vichara, to let go of anything that we feel that does not fit that. So we'll start with the ardas and then we'll chant the Guru Mantra. As we chant the Guru Mantra, Maharaji has given us the technique. Gaviya, we're going to sing that praise of Paramatma, Vai, Guru, Suniya. As we chant, we also listen. The mind needs to take part, it needs to be present. Gaviya, Suniya, Manarakhiya Pao. And we do it with that love, with that pyar for our beloved, for our Pritam Pyare, for Vaheguru. So let's start with the Simran, everybody chanting together, listening with love. Why, Guru, 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 why, Guru. Tudhe aage ardas hamari, jiyo pind sab tera. Tudhe aage ardas hamari, jiyo pind sab tera. Kaho Nanak sab teri vadiyai, koi nao na jane mera. Kaho Nanak sab teri vadiyai, koi nao na jane mera. Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh. So Gurmukh Pyareo, even though we've just done ardas and I've just said koi nao na jane mera, my name's Amandeep Kaur. So I had no plan to introduce myself, but as Vijay asked, I realized it is important in the sense that by trade, if you like, I'm a coach, a life coach, and also a chaplain, a hospital chaplain. So in the respect that I'm not just here to put down self-development and do the Vidyaya of Sikhi. I'm definitely here to do the Vidyaya of Sikhi, but it's not as clear-cut as self-development is bad and Sikhi is good. So I just wanted to share that so we know which perspective that we're coming from. So every time we want to do something, for me, what's important is that intention. What is that ardas that we've just done? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Now, whether that's you're going to sit down and do your nitnem, or whether that's you're going to do your simran, or you're going to do any kam in your life, any job in your life, it's important that we realize why we're doing that. What is it that we're hoping to achieve? And when I was preparing this session, Sikhi versus self-development, it had a lot of transformations. It had a lot of changes. And normally I just sit down and I just put everything down. But this one transformed about 3 times. So what I realized was actually, I'm not here to tell you what's right and wrong. What I want to share is that process that happened as this was being prepared. So Maharaj kende bande khoj dil har roj na fir parasani mahe. That we should be, Maharaj is inviting us to search within our own heart. So we're not wandering around in confusion. So we know what it is that we're here to do, why we're doing what we're doing, and we're living with that intention. E jo duniya seher mila dastagiri na hai. And why is it that Maharaj wants us to search within our own hearts? The first thing is that this journey of life, Maharaj tells us again and again, is one of the mind. And the only person who can know what's in your mind is you. You and Paramatma, because Paramatma is Antarijami. So the first invitation is to, as we go through this, to only look at your own mind. Sometimes when we, me included, when we come to Katha, when we come to the Gurdwara, we learn new things, we're there and we're saying, oh, Flana does that, my mum does that, my sister does that, my husband does that. And so I ask that you only look at your own mind, because that's what Maharaji comes back to again and again. E man meriya, e man pyariya, e man chanchala, man tu jot sarup hai. Again and again, that invitation is to look at your own mind. And the second thing is, E jo duniya seher mila dastagiri na hai. This might sound really sad, but Maharaj is telling there's no one here holding your hand. Yes, we have the blessing, the ultimate blessing of Guru Granth Sahib Ji. We have the blessing of the Sadh Sangat. We have the blessing of Simran. And you can have all of that. You can plant the seed in the soil. But unless you are willing to cultivate that for yourself, unless you're willing to put that effort in yourself, you're still going to be feeling alone. And as you start to do those practices that Maharaji gives you, and they leave you to it because they're so compassionate, Maharaj doesn't take over your will, they give you free will. But with pyar, they instruct you as the ultimate parent does. And so some of what I'm going to talk about, not too much hopefully, is a little bit about my journey as well. That when I was in what is called the dark night of the soul, according to St. John of the Cross, who was a Christian mystic, which is a term that we use in self-development. But when I was going through my dark night, when I was in the worst time of my life, I was in excruciating physical and emotional pain, and I'd wake up in the night like that. What I realized was that actually I'm alone. I have an amazing husband, I have amazing in-laws, I have amazing people around me, but in that dark night, when I'm suffering the most, I'm just left with me and this mind. And that's where those seeds, well, that's where that kirpa of Sikhi came into my life. I was born into a Sikh Punjabi family, but only by name, not by nature. So coming into Sikhi in the last 10 to 15 years came from that place of darkness. And for me, has grown into something so beautiful that I just can't imagine what life would be like without Guru. I was having this conversation with my 16-year-old son just before I came here. that what would life look like if we didn't have our Guru? It's just unimaginable. What would life look like if Guru Nanak Dev Ji did not come to hear that pukar of the people who were struggling, who were suffering in pain, if they did not do that taras, if they did not have that dayan come? And so this is an invitation, it's not a lecture, to take that blessing and walk forward with it. So when I talk about Gurbani, when I talk about Simran, when I talk about anything, I'm talking about my understanding. Aap apni buddh hai jiti. It's okay if you have your own understanding, that's fine. But even if I say it in authority, I'm talking about my understanding of Gurbani. So for me, there's two things that are really important. One is that Gyan, that Maharaj has given us Gurbani to read, Hanji, Gurbani to understand, Gurbani to implement, and Gurbani to become Gurbani Baniye. And so this is the light that shows us the way. This is how we can use that kasavatti, we can check, am I on the right path or am I on the wrong path? So the first part of this session is going to be looking at how do we check that? How do we check where we are, where we're going? And we're going to use Gurbani throughout here, but especially there. And then the second part, Maharaj Di Kirpa Naal, for me is about the dhyan. The dhyan is the practice. As we said, Maharaji is addressing the mind again and again. So what is that practice that Maharaji points us to? And how can we implement that? When I was first coming into Sikhi, and probably still, the question that was always on my mind is, yes, I'm starting to learn what's important, what to do, what not to do. And with anything that I learn, the question in my mind is always how. Okay, you're saying stay away from these vikar, from these panchchor, don't fall into anxiety, don't fall into hatred. But how do I do that? I know it, but how do I do it? And that's what we really want to get to. And all of these, the Gyan and the Dhyan, point to that Naam, point to that truth. It points to that true purpose of our life, which is to meet Paramatma. Gobind Milanki, e teri bariya, it's our turn. And sometimes we forget this. It's really important to learn our itihas. It's really important to learn the Rahat, the Rani Bani. All of that stuff is equally important. But if we lose sight of why we're actually here, why are we walking this path of Guru Nanak, that it is to meet that beloved, it's to have an experience of Guru, then what was it all for? That is the key. And all of those things help us to walk that path. It's that union, and it's to live. Sometimes we pick up our Gutka Sahib, we pick up our phone, we might even have the blessing of having Gurbani Kant. But what happens then when we put that phone, that Gutka down, when we open our eyes? Are we separating Sikhi from life? Because a lot of us do that, including me. And actually, this is about living in that state of Naam. There is the foundation of Naam, and then life is to be built upon that. And so we want to keep that in mind as we go through this. So again, I'm just going to reiterate, I'm not here to say all of self-development is bad, so I'm not trying to catch you out by asking this question. What I will do is, again, invite you to focus on yourself with honesty. If you want to write this down, if you've got your phones or a piece of paper, you can do that. If you want to share that, I would love that too. So what are you trying to improve about yourself? And if anybody here is not trying to improve anything, please put your hand up. I would love to know why. We're all perfect. So does anybody want to share something that they're improving? I'm not trying to catch you out, I promise. Anji. Why? Mm-hmm. Why? Fiji, just ruined my whole talk. No, I'm joking. Mm. Hanji, Hanji, Hanji. You've taken the point. That was like my big thing. No, I'm joking. That's it. And that's ideal, right? To be in that place, to know that we are Jyot Sarup, that we are that divine light. And there's no improving on that. That's already whole. And that is every single one of us in this room already is that perfection. And there's something that I say to people sometimes, which came out of that gorge of myself. And one of the things I used to really struggle with is unworthiness, like never feeling enough. And one day I was, these are the things that I do. I was having my conversation with Maharaj in my mind. And what I understood was, does Maharaj ever make a mistake? Is it possible that Paramatma could make a mistake? Because they've made gravity perfect, that we're not floating around, we're not crawling. They've made the sun's temperature perfect, that life can exist here. It's not being burnt, it's not frozen. They've made a woman's body perfect, that it can create and sustain a baby in the womb. And yet, can Vaheguru make a mistake with us? It's not possible, right? So we are all made in that perfection. Some other dharams talk about the original sin, that we're all papi from the beginning. But that is not Sikhi. Sikhi is saying you are perfection, you are Jyot Sarup. Just like if you take a drop from the ocean and inspect it under a microscope, you will see the same tattva, the same qualities within that drop that you see in the ocean. And if Paramatma is Sattva, Santokha, Daya, Nimrata, if they have that courage, that power, that is also existent within us. But there is something that is stopping us from accessing that, and we will go into that. So the thing that I'm trying to improve about myself, at least until this week, when this gorge started to happen, was my weight. I've always been very slim, and then due to, I won't go too much into it, due to changes in my life, I found myself putting on weight and really being down on that. And more recently, I've come into this state of acceptance about myself, but this was something that was playing on my mind. And I just want you to bring something to your mind. You don't have to share it, but just from that state of honesty, what is it that is within you that niggles at you? It might even be a Sikhi thing, like I want to do more Simran, I want to do more Path, I want to do this, I want to do that. Just keep it in your mind as we go through this. So it's important that we then define what is self-development and what is Sikhi. And I want you to look closer because I'm going to ask you a question in a moment. So self-development, I asked Google Baba for this definition. So it's intentional, lifelong process of improving your skills, capabilities, self-awareness. And it's to enhance your life, to have a good life, to live at your potential. As they say, live your best life. And it involves setting goals for personal growth, taking action to achieve them, taking on a coach like me to help you to do that. Does this sound like there's anything wrong with this? Just out of interest. Be honest. No? I don't think so either. Until you look at the definition of Sikhi. Sikhi, Sikhya, Guru Vichar. What is Sikhi? Sikhi is the Sikhya. It's what you've learnt from doing Vichar, from contemplating Guru, whether that's Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj, or whether that is that light, that Guru that is within us, that Paramatma. That's what Sikhi is. And if we go into this definition of what it is, it's that path, it's that pantha of Naam, guided by Satguru, guided by Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and that Satguru that is within us, recognizing that Ikonkar. The purpose, as we said right at the beginning, is to meet Vaheguru, is to have that experience of Paramatma, and to wake up from that homme, that ego, that illusion, that maya. And I've just written some things here. Obviously, there's more things that we do within this path, but through that practice of Gurbani, of Simran, of Sadh Sangat, whilst living in the world. So the question I'm going to ask is, what do you notice as any difference between those two? Sadh Sangat? Hanji? Okay. Yeah. Vaheguru. Vaheguru. Anji. Brilliant. Thank you. Anything else? Is there anything that pops out as different between self-development and Sikhi? Anji. Anji. Would you like to say more? Anji. Anji. Did everybody hear that? Okay. So Benji was saying the difference that she found was Sadh Sangat, about that company that you keep. And Viji is saying like the focus is totally different. In Sikhi, it's all about Guru, right? It's all about that spiritual path. I'm putting words in your mouth. But in self-development, what is the emphasis in self-development then? Anji. Yeah. Yeah. So just the temporary, right? That's what I think that's the word that you used earlier, the temporary, what we're here for right now. And for me, the interesting difference is self-development emphasizes the self, right? It sounds obvious. But where in Sikhi does it say self? Maharaj kende aap gavaiye. Lose yourself, lose your sense of self. Da sho paiye. Then you will find Vaheguru. So that self is not really emphasized in that way. There is an emphasis on self, and we'll get into that. But as Viji is saying, it's understanding what is true and what is not true, what is temporary, what is permanent, what is eternal. So that's the question. Which self am I trying to develop? Which self am I trying to improve when we're doing self-development? And you can read that Jyot Sarup is the truth of who we really are, that divine light, that Ikonkar, part of that oneness. Then there's the internal versus the external, the subtle versus the physical. And we've shared this, that Maharaji is telling us that this is who we really are. Man tu Jyot Sarup hai, apna mool pachan. And within that is an instruction. Not just your mind is divine light, but mool pachan. Sometimes we get confused, and this is the question that I've had in my mind quite a lot, that sometimes people tell us, you're not here to do anything, you're just here to surrender, just accept hukum. But again and again in Gurbani, we're given an instruction, and it's pretty much the same instruction again and again, which is to do something to help you to recognize the truth, that Simran, to come into Sangat, to meditate, to do vichar, to contemplate. So the instruction here is apna mool pachan, recognize who you are. There's a doing, there's a karni in that. Man har ji tere naal hai, gurmati rangaman. How do we do that? Through gurmat, through the teachings that the Guru has given. And at first, those teachings come from the Sadh Sangat. They come from the Guru, the Gurbani itself. And then at some point, that starts to become that internal journey. That Gurbani is happening inside of you, and you're being guided. So where self-development can actually be helpful is here. Homme dirag rog hai, daru pi ismaye. So Maharaj is telling us that the opposite of your true self is your homme, is your false self, it's your ego. But self-development can actually start to help us to identify that. So when I was coming on my journey, when I was in that time of struggle, of pain, of suffering, both of these journeys started to happen at once. So with Maharaji's Kirpa, we started to come into Sikhi, and at the same time, I started to investigate, why am I in so much physical pain? So I'd been to hospitals, I'd had tests, I'd had procedures, operations, gone private, gone public, whatever, NHS, all of it. And I was getting to this point where no one could help me. So I was starting to investigate these natural remedies, these whole world of self-development, to find out what's going on, what is this connection? And at the same time, having this existential crisis, which is about, is this what life is about? Am I just here? Am I meant to suffer? Am I meant to struggle? Is there something more? But where self-development really helped me was to identify the cause of my suffering, the cause of my pain, which I don't mind sharing, started from the mind, which Gurbani backs up. Those thoughts that we're having will release hormones in our body, that trapped trauma, that trapped energy. These all sounds like self-development, but actually there's Panktiyan and Gurbani that are telling us the same thing. Sarab roga aukhad naam, that for all rog, all diseases, that solution is naam. So in order to understand that we have this false self, that homme, we also need to investigate it. So that part about self-awareness in self-development or self-improvement is really important, because only if you start to look at your mind, if you start to look at your man bach karam, your thoughts, your words, your actions, will you start to see, where am I showing up in my own thinking, my manmat, by the societal thinking, the cultural, the conditioning that we're given from our parents, our teachers, from media, the films, social media, our friends, that are constantly telling us what's important. And where is Gurmat coming into this? So Maharaj kende kirpa kare je apni ta gur ka sabad kamahe, nanak kahe suno jan ho, it sanjam dukha jaye. That as you come, and we'll address this in the second part, as you, again, there's an action there. To kama something means to earn it, to work towards it. As you earn that shabad, as you earn that connection, as you do that simran, to start to connect to Paramatma, to feel their presence, then that dukh will go away. That's how those troubles depart. So instead of just, I want to use the really silly word, but I think we don't want to just poo-poo self-development. I couldn't think of a better word. We don't want to just say that's rubbish. And it's important we understand why we're looking into those things of self-development. So what am I talking about? We'll get to this. Things like abundance mindset. Things like, let's hack your health. Things like, what are your love languages for your relationships? Why are we constantly thinking about that? How do I get the next thing? How do I make sure that my body is pure muscle and have so many protein shakes? Why are we thinking? Why am I thinking? And I'm going to share something personal here. Is why am I thinking I'm at a certain time in my life as a woman that it's not okay for me to be a bit heavier? Like, where has that message come from? Because we just came back from Punjab, an amazing trip. And there were no Bibia there who were just like, why do I look like this, right? I remember going to see our relatives, and I sat down, and he's one of my Shote Veer, he's my husband's cousin. And we sat down, and within 2 minutes he said, Bhabhi, tera bhar bahut vad gaya. Like direct. He was just like, your weight has increased so much. And to them, it's not a thing, right? And I felt shocked. My ego kicked in. I saw it really clearly. And then when I was looking back on it, it was like, yeah, and he was just asking, right? So where am I getting this message that this is not okay? That's what we want to ask ourselves. Where are we getting the message? It used to be, and I apologize for this in advance, it used to be the women took the most amount of time in front of the mirror, but not anymore, right? The Veers are, checking their dari, they're checking the dastar, they're checking their muscles, checking whatever it is, and where has that programming come from? So why are we trying to improve? Why are we trying to develop? This from the Koj, from understanding my journey, myself, and as a chaplain, as a coach, from the people that I work with, it's these two things. It's either dukh, that pain, or that's desire, that book. So we have so much stress, anxiety, depression. We're confused about what we're here to do, what we're meant to be doing, how we're supposed to be showing up as a woman, as a mother, as a daughter, as a husband, as a son. This is an interesting topic considering I work in a hospital, but why is it we have more disease than we've ever had, and yet we have so much better healthcare, so much more drugs, so many more vaccines, and yet our hospitals are overflowing, literally overflowing. There's so much more conflict. There's so much more fear. And so that's why we're looking towards self-development, because we want to overcome this, which is natural. And then there's that desire, that conditioning of, you'll be happy when you get your degree. And I always ask this, how happy were you when you passed school or university? How long did that last? How happy were you when you got your first job? How long did that last? And the funny question is always, sorry, but how happy were you after you got married? How long did that last, right? And some people will claim they're still very happy, which is brilliant. And, you know, we were so fixated on once you get past the 1 year, 2 year, 3 year mark, now you have to have children. And sometimes I ask people, why did you have children? And they'll say, because that's what you're supposed to do next. And I was like, was it not because you wanted to share your pyar? Was it not, you know, what other reason was there other than that was the next milestone? So, you know, then you've got to buy a house, and one house isn't enough these days. You need a couple on rent as well. And then you have your holidays and you have your cars. And so that book is always increasing. And for some people, it's that genuine desire for connection, to connect to something more than themselves. And that's fair enough. So why are we looking at self-development? Everybody in this room has some sort of connection to Sikhi. That's why you're here. And yet, if I'm honest with myself, I will still go to YouTube and type something in and look for another solution on how do you do this or how do you do that. So I left one of my jobs at the hospital, and then my husband was like, where are we going to get that money from now? And this video just, like magic, it just pops up on your YouTube, doesn't it? It's almost like they're listening about how do you have this abundance mindset, and how do you save in an intelligent way so you don't have to go to work every day. And I clicked on it, and I didn't think about it, but I clicked on it, and I was like, wow, this really makes sense. You know, put your money in an ISA if anybody's interested. Put your money in an ISA and you'll make money automatically without having to do anything. But then that's all I was thinking about for the rest of that evening, was how am I going to do this? And so part of it is that accessibility. They're talking in our language, especially for those who are born and brought up here, in a modern terms, in modern concepts. They're speaking to that conditioning that we've learned at school and in our homes and in the media. It's relatable, it's practical. Like, who wants to sit there and do their part and do Simran? That sounds really hard. Why not just use this technique to hack your mind? That's so much easier, right? And then there's this lack of understanding of Sikhi depth, and I take responsibility for this because we all should. You know, how much of that prachar that is being done on the stage is giving us. And it's amazing to come to this Gurdwara just before this and sit and listen in English and understand it. And I'm not saying don't learn Punjabi, don't learn Gurmukhi. It's important, but you need that sahara, you need that help at the beginning especially. So language can be a barrier. And how much are we talking practically? This was a conversation I was having with someone about Kaam, with our youth, that lust. Who is telling our children how to deal with their lust? Forget our children. Who is telling our adults how to deal with that lust? Gurbani is telling us, but a lot of the youth especially do not have access or the understanding, even if we do, on how to deal with these topics. This is what we should be talking about in our Gurdwara, the practical things. So we're not having to get into addiction, and we're not having to go outside of our dharam to find ways to deal with this. People are following these, is it 12 steps? 12-step programs to come out of addiction, and it's amazing. I've looked into it. But you can easily replace something like that. Because what is it talking about? It's talking about connection, belonging, sadha sangat, that Benji was talking about. It's talking about seva, having more meaning in your life, helping others. And it's talking about a way to deal with your own mind, your own worries, having some sort of practice we have Simran. It's talking about a guidebook, some way, so you know what to do and when. We have Gurbani. Like, it's all there, but where? Where do we go? When I was working in the hospital, there were people who'd come in with addictions. There's people who'd come in with terminal illnesses, miscarriages. And what I really wanted to do, Gurumukh Pyareo, was to send them to the Gurdwara and say, look, and sometimes that was the case, I'm not going to lie. There was a Benji who passed away, young family, and this Gurdwara, I was able to call people up and they arranged the funeral, they paid for it. So that was amazing. And I'm not saying that the Gurdwara is not doing anything, but I don't know if I can still call myself the youth, but we as the next generations that are born and brought up here, do not wait for someone to do this stuff. Do it. You know, you've got the ideas. Two people together by Gurudas Ji calls Sangat, right? So there's two of you, you can start to make a small change. And so there's that, the cultural barriers, there's so much culture that we are calling Sikhi, which isn't Sikhi, it's culture, right? Aa karida, o karida, and actually it's got nothing to do with Sikhi. When I was ill in that hospital at one point, I had been there for 2 weeks, nil by mouth. And that was the start, actually. That was so much girpa. It was so amazing. But I was still stuck in this cultural Sikhi, and I was saying to Maharaj in my mind, Maharaj, if you make me better, we'll do a Sukhmani Sahib Path. Hanji? And we did. Came out of the hospital. We had it at the Gurdwara. I spent the first hour of the Sukhmani Sahib Path in the kitchen doing the langar. I spent the second hour of the Sukhmani Sahib Path looking at who's coming, who's going, and what they're wearing. The Giani did the Sukhmani Sahib Path. The Giani did the Ardas, and yet I wanted to benefit from that. My job in that situation was to sit, to listen, to do that Khoj of that Gurbani, Sukhmani Sukh, Amrit, Prabh, Naam. The answer's right there, right from the beginning. How do I find that Sukh? Sukhmani Sukh, Amrit, Prabh Naam. Through Prabhu da Naam, through that Naam, that, do any of us even know what that is? Do we discuss that? What is Naam? How do I access that Naam? Naam is the destination. Naam is the experience, but Naam is also the method. And we'll get into that. So I'm going to speed up a little bit to make sure that we do get into that. So why are we looking for self and in development and improvement? Nanak Dukhiya Sab Sansar. The whole world is suffering. And this is what I mean. I invite you all. You all have phones, no doubt. You all have Gurbani apps, no doubt. Use it, right? When you go to Instagram, when you go to TikTok, when you go to WhatsApp, pause. Take out your Gurbani app. And before you ask your friend that question, type it up in English. And I'll give an example of what I did with that, part of that Khoj in a minute. So why are we suffering? The whole world is suffering. Actually, look this Shabad up because before this bit, it gives you why the world is suffering. So do that Khoj. But it gives you then the solution. Maharaj tells us, Manne nao soi jin jaye, auri karam na lekhe laye. That one who accepts the Naam. If I say, Virji, come and pick up this bottle, and Virji just says, okay, meri gal nahi manni, right? If Virji says again, Benji said, pick up the bottle, pick up the bottle, pick up the bottle, pick up the bottle. Gal nahi manni halle, he hasn't accepted it. But if Virji comes and picks up this bottle, fir meri gal manni, meaning that when we're reading Gurbani, we're meant to read it and then do what Gurbani is telling us. It's not enough to just read anymore. Yes, that's the first step. We want to read it. We want to do Khoj of it. We want to contemplate it, search it, and then we want to implement it. And then Maharaj is clear here. Auri karam na lekhe lai, nothing else. And this sounds harsh. It sounded harsh to me, but with Maharaj's Kirpa, the more we walk on this path, it's clear there is nothing else that is truly going to give us that deep-stated sense of peace other than Naam. And that's hard to accept because we're like, no, but when I get £1 million, when my kids grow up, when this happens, when that happens, then I'll feel better, then I'll get sukh, and that's not sukh, that's pleasure. And that is temporary. But that Naam, that experience, when you do that Simran, when you follow Guruji's hukam, there is no problem in the world when that experience is in your heart, in your mind. So why self-development? What are we looking at? We're looking at, this is just my little joke, it was quite fun, but we're looking at growth mindset. The only mindset that we need to have is the Gurmat mindset, which we're going to find where? In Gurbani. If we don't know what it means, we'll find it in the Sadh Sangat. The Sadh Sangat, how do we recognize? Sat Sangat kaisi jani hai, jithe eko naam vakhani hai. Sat Sangat is not someone in a bana, in a dastar, wearing their kakar. Only if that person is talking only about naam, they're doing vichar of Guru, they're reading the Gurbani, they're doing the Simran, that is Sat Sangat. No, the person that you meet who is then saying, bro, what you doing? What's happening with your wife? Or, oh, your sus is like this, your mother-in-law's like that, oh, my husband, my wife's like that. That is not Sat Sangat. It doesn't matter what you look like on the outside. One of the biggest things that happened in my life was the Sangat that I got. And I had different Sangat. And how did I get that Sangat? Was ardas. I remember being at the beginning of my early stages into Sikhi, which is still early stages, by the way, asking a Benji, you know, Maharaj is always talking about Sat Sangat or Sad Sangat. How do I find them? Because I would go into, someone was saying about Slough. I would go into Slough Gurdwara, Matha Tek, have langar, and yet there was no one I could ask a question to. And I was like, but Maharaj is telling me Sat Sangat, and there's no one I can talk to. And I would ask, you know, a Bibi would come up to me and I'd say, okay, but what does Maharaj say about this? And I'm not sure, I've got to go now. And so that Sangat, be aware of who you are calling Sadh Sangat, because that Sangat is going to be the one that brings you to Guru. Otherwise, they are not Sadh Sangat. So the growth mindset is Gurmat, is Gurbani, is Simran. The health hacks, Gurbani is reminding us both two things. One is, "E sarir sab mool hai maya," that this body is maya, it's temporary and it's going to go. So don't overly put your attention on it, because it's not going to last. One minute I had my health, I had 2 young children at the time. The next minute, I couldn't even walk to the bottom of the drive. I was in so much pain. Your health is going to go. It doesn't mean don't look after it, right? It just means don't overly emphasize it. And at the same time, Maharaj kende har mandir eho sarir hai. That this sarir, this body is Hari da mandir, it's the Gurdwara. Why? Because that jyot is residing within here. So treat it like you would treat the Gurdwara. You're not going to put rubbish, and I'm saying this and I'm thinking about all that chocolate that I had last night, but treat it with respect as much as you can. The wealth manifestation and abundance. What are we meant to be manifesting in abundance? Is that namatan, is that jyot. And I'll come back to this point in a minute. The relationship, the love languages, the attachment theories, and, you know, sorry, I'm looking at the sisters here, the Benjis, right? And I remember when the kids were young, I was looking into all these parenting things, and this is what I've learned, is that your relationship with Paramatma will reflect your relationship with yourself, which will reflect every relationship in your life. If you see Vaheguru as judging you, as harsh, as why have you done this to me? And Vaheguru wants me to tick this box and I'm a bad person if I don't. That criticalness is coming from you, not from Maharaj. That is who you are inside of your mind, and that is what you will project to everybody around you. If you see Paramatma as compassionate, as all loving, as guiding you, as forgiving, then that's how your mind will show up, and that's how you'll show up for your family. And yes, Paramatma will tell you when you're doing something wrong as well. A nice practice to have, which really helped me and still helps me, is to just take a hukamnama every day on your phone and do khoj of it. Don't just read it. That's your love letter from Vaheguru. If Guru Sahib was here in their physical roop, in a human roop, and gave you a love letter to your question, would you be like, Hanji, and then like not look at it again? You would pore over it, every single shabad, every single word, and say, Maharaj, what are you saying to me today? So whether that is the Hukamnama from Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, our eternal Guru, whether you take that on your phone, which is what I do every day, and it's always on point, it's always relevant. Don't have time, but I could give you 20,000 different stories about how Maharaj showed up for me that day, and I felt amazing, but Maharaj is watch your ego, and then something happened and I needed to, or I felt bad about something, and Maharaj was so compassionate and it changed my whole day. And meaning and purpose, we've already covered. What is our true purpose in this life is Gobind Milanki, e teri bariya. It's your turn to meet Vaheguru. Now here's a question I don't want to answer. I want you to contemplate it. If your purpose is to meet Vaheguru, what steps are you taking towards that? How is it going to happen? Because if I said to you, you're going to go on holiday next year, how are you going to go on holiday? You'll be like, I'm going to save this much money. I need my ditchi. I need to book my ticket. You would have all these steps planned out on how you're going to go on holiday, or how you're going to get your next job, or how are your children, what school are your children going to go to? But if I ask you, how are you going to meet Vaheguru? Like, what are the practical steps you need to take to meet Vaheguru, to experience Vaheguru? Have you ever considered that? And what steps are they? And it's not to make you feel bad about it. It's to open that opportunity to say, what is that experience and how do you get there? Is it going to happen by just dressing up? Is it going to happen by reading Gurbani and then not moving forward? Not implementing that Gurbani? Because we were going to experience Vaheguru through our mind. So what needs to happen to our mind to experience that prakash, that light of Vaheguru, to hear that anhad shabad inside, to taste that amrit ras on your tongue? And nowadays people are saying this stuff's not real. Why is it not real? Why has it become mythology? Because people are not experiencing it, because they're satisfied just to wear the roop and to walk around as a Singh or Sighani. But that's not what Guru Nanak Dev Ji is telling us. Again and again, if you sit with that Bani, you can't not come away knowing that these are real experiences. When you come into the true Sadh Sangat that are practicing, you cannot come away not knowing that that is possible for everybody. So we're trying to fill that hole and feel whole. There's that disconnection that Gurbani tells us that happens from birth when we come out of the mother's womb and they cut that cord. We become disconnected from Sach, from Paramatma. And we spend the rest of our lives trying to fill that hole, whether it's with food, with our phones, with entertainment, with money, just so we can feel enough, just so we can feel whole. And sometimes that turns into negative things. It turns into alcohol addiction, shopping addiction, phone addiction. And sometimes we think that we're doing something positive, right? We think that when I lose enough weight, then I'll feel peaceful. When I grow enough muscle, I'll feel peaceful. When I have enough knowledge, I'll feel peaceful. But that book keeps growing. So here's a self-development thing that I can share. The hedonic treadmill. Has anybody heard of this? Okay. So it's where, this is what all corporations are using to keep you buying another phone even though you don't need another phone, or another car, or new clothes that you don't need. So what it is you have a desire, you strive to get it, you enjoy it, and then you need something else to make you feel full again. So hedonic means motivated by the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. Who can relate to that, right? We're looking for that pleasure because we don't want to feel that dukh. We stay up at night watching Netflix into the early hours because we don't want to deal with what's going on in our mind or our relationships, right? And so it's constantly changing. That line is constantly moving to when I will be happy when I get that. But we never get there, right? And so what does Gurbani say? We always want to come back. What is Maharaj saying? Avat ko harak. When things come, we're happy. Jat ko rove. When it goes, we're crying. E dukh sukh nale laga. We're just attached to that pain and pleasure cycle again and again. Ape dukh sukh pog pogave. Gurmukh so anaraga. So what do? We want to go beyond that. The Gurmukh, and the Gurmukh is not the physical person. The Gurmukh is the one whose mind in that moment is facing the Guru. They learn how to go beyond that pain and pleasure cycle. I'm going to speed up. So this is what that hedonic cycle reminded me of, right? What is Gurbani saying? Is dehi andar panch chor vasai, काम क्रोध लोभ मोह अहंकारा अमृत लूटे मन मुख नहीं बुझे कोई ना सुने पुकारा. That we have these 5 entities, those lustful desires, not just for sexual lust, but for those eggless cakes, for those handbags and those coats and the latest shastar, right? It's endless. When we get it, we become greedy, we need more, it's never enough. Then we become attached to it. We say it's mine. I used to do this with my children. Children are amazing mirrors. I'd be like, Put, mera nahi, mera mujh mein kuch nahi, jo kuch hai so tera. I'd be repeating this. Put, they're like fighting over the Lego, right? And I'm like, Put, it's not yours. It's all Vaiguru's. Just share. It's all Vaiguru's. And then my daughter got older and she's like my height now. And she's like taking my hoodie and putting it on. I'm like, but that's my hoodie. She's like, mera mujh mein kuch nahi, jo kuch hai so tera. So you be prepared for that, right? And then we get that sense of ahankar, this is who I am. And if you lose your job, who are you without it? If your relationship falls apart, who are you without it? If your child makes a mistake, who are you without that? And when things don't work out, we go to krodh, we get angry, or we become anxious. So this is the panch jor that are within this body, they're within this mind, that Maharaji is telling us that we need to deal with. Don't fight with everybody around you, your husband, your wife, your children, your parents, your colleagues. Your first fight is with your own mind. Do that jagara, do that fight with these panch who are inside of you. Then start thinking about the world. So what is influencing your desires? I watched this the other night. So as much as I was like, Netflix, The Social Dilemma, I would highly recommend it. Because it tells you these people who actually worked on these apps, who made them addictive, and now they are speaking out against them. So how much is your mind? And I thought I wasn't being influenced by this, by the way, until this week. And I realized I'd just come back onto Instagram for various reasons and realized how much I actually was being influenced. Even if you're following only Sikhi things, you are still being influenced. And Maharaji has given us the path of mukti, not gulami. So we're being slaves. If someone says, oh, this jatha says this, how much hatred is there? Oh, that jatha did this and that jatha did that. That's gulami. You're being influenced by that. So the social conditioning, what we're learning without even realizing it from our parents, right? That's bad if you get divorced. That's bad if you don't have children. Actually, that's hukam, right? If you don't have children, that's hukam. That's not your fault. So who is calling you bad, right? So we need to wake up to this. We need to awaken our mind. Simmer, 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 gur apana, soya man jagai. Again, Maharaj is pointing, not once, not twice, 3 times. Simmer, simmer, simmer. Do that simran, gur apana, of your guru, soya man jagai, the sleeping mind that is asleep in these belief systems, in what the panch chor are constantly feeding us. Awaken it through that simran. And what are we to ask for? Bintu dhor je mangana sir dukha ke dukh, deho naam santokhiya uttare man ki pukh. And Maharaj goes on, gur van tin harya kitya nanak kya manuk. So another thing that I learned was sometimes we just use one line or two lines of Gurbani, but we should look at it in the whole context. So we're saying, don't ask for anything because other than Naam, because it's going to bring you dukh. I was share this joke. I was listening to somebody called Osho in my self-development realm. And someone was asking him, is it okay for me to ask for a nice, beautiful wife? And this guy was saying, yeah, you can ask for it. And he was like, what do you want? He was like, beautiful, intelligent, looks after the house, perfect in every way. And he was like, yeah, ask for it. But he was like, but have you considered the mother-in-law? Meaning you might get what you want, but you don't know what's going to come with that. The mother-in-law might be horrendous. It's just a joke, right? So you don't know when you ask for something. And I'm so blessed, no more blessed than anyone else. But I'm so blessed that everything I've ever asked for from Maharaj, I've got, just to find out that that's not what I want. That's not what I need. And the only thing left to ask for is that Naam, because that is the only thing that is going to fill that hole, that is going to fill that book. I have an amazing husband. I have 2 children, boy and a girl. Even my mother-in-law is amazing, right? Every time I decide I want to do a different job, Maharaji gives me that opportunity without even having certain experience. That job just shows up. Talk about manifestation. And then after a few weeks, months, years, that book comes back, because that's not what's going to fill it. It's Paramatma. And why is this last pankti important? So that Naam is going to make us content, but then we're like, well, who should I ask when I'm suffering? But Maharaj is saying, Guru has made the entire srishti, and it's flourishing. This world would do even better without humanity on it, no offense. And you think that Maharaj is not going to give you what you need, right? That's total game changer. It's not just saying you should ask for Naam, you're bad if you ask for anything else. It's saying Maharaj is going to give you everything anyway. But what your mind needs, the sustenance that it needs, is Naam, to be content. So this abundance mindset is a brilliant example. And I came across this article. So if you read the first half, scarcity thinking is there'll never be enough. You're just hoarding stuff, you're being selfish, you think that, that fear is ruling you. And then look at abundance thinking, there's always more. We're going to share knowledge, we're going to give to other people, we're going to strive to grow, we're going to believe that there's more to come. Sounds okay, right? Again, when we look at these things in isolation, that sounds right. Chardikala mindset, if I earn more, I can give more, I can do seva, I can give to charity. So what I'm going to share now was not Gurbani, but it is Gurmat in a way. And it's from Plato, who predates the physical form of Guru Nanak Dev Ji on this world. And they say poverty does not come from a decrease in wealth, but from a multiplication of desires. And that's deep. Because then it's telling us that it doesn't matter how much money you've got. If you're a millionaire and you've still got so many desires, you're still going to be in poverty. So what is labeled here as abundance thinking, that there will always be more and I've got to strive and I've got to grow to get that, that's actually poverty thinking. It's saying I haven't got enough. So it's the difference between what you have and what you want is what makes it poverty, not abundance mindset. Abundance is actually being content with what you've got, knowing that Maharaj is always providing. So what does Maharaj say? Je ko hove dubala nang puk ki peer. Even if you're doubled over, you're naked and you're hungry and you're in pain, that you've got no money in your pockets, no one's helping you, nothing's worked out for you. Maharaj kende chit ave os par brahm ta nichal hove raj. That even then, if you remember Vaheguru, you'll feel like a king, right? And then people might say, well, I've got anxiety. I've got to work on self-development. What are you telling me? do my, read Gurbani, do Simran, my anxiety is going to go away. I've done that. I've tried that. What about if I'm ill? Like me, you have diseases in your body. What if there's kalesh in your relationships, conflicts? What if you can't sleep? Surely then Guru doesn't have the answer. It's outside. I need to take a pill. And Maharaj kende, even then, Jako chinta bahut dehi vyape rog. When you're in that chinta, anxiety, when you have the diseases of your body, Maharaj goes on to say, when you're wrapped in those attachments of your family, you can't sleep, you can't sit. Even then, chit ave os par brahm, tan man sital hoye. The mind and the body become soothed. Now, there's no problem with looking at self-development to help you to start walking on that. But again, Maharaji tells you again and again and again, that Par Brahm, that Naam, that Simran is going to help you on that path. And so before we move on to the next bit, which is important, did our ancestors strive for these things? Like, just put your mind, if you're thinking about your list of what you're striving for, and think not our parents' generation, because they were in survival mode coming into a new country and all of that. And maybe not even them, but think back to those ancestors we were hearing about in the Gatha. Were they trying to build a growth mindset? Or were they fully in that trust of Paramatma? Were they trying to, checking out their bodies every 5 minutes? I can't think of a better way to put it, right? Were they thinking, I can't even think of examples right now, but thinking about what you're thinking about, what I'm thinking about, were they thinking about those same things? Mm-hmm. Ji. Mm. Yeah. Ji. Hanji. So what we were hearing about was how the Mughals were coming in to destroy your village, to rape your women, to take, right? So are we in that situation? Nowhere near that situation. Hanji. Ji. 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 And when you're not grateful. Right. Yeah. That's it. And so even with gratitude, not that you shouldn't be grateful, but even with gratitude, it's just a thought, right? And it's a thought that will come and go. When we remember gratitude, we're happy for a bit. And when something's taken away, then we're like, why, right? So it's something that points beyond gratitude. And we're going to get to that now. But Maharaj kente babaniya kahaniya put saput karen. Je satgur pave so man lan sei karam karen. So it's amazing that we hear so much itihas of our ancestors, but the whole point of hearing that itihas is to learn how to act like them. When we hear about the Bibiyan in Mir Manu's jails, whose children were cut piece by piece and put hard around their neck, or Mata Gujari or the Sahibzade giving their shahidiyan, the Singhs that were cut into tiny little pieces, what we think, or what I used to think, was they were just strong-minded. They were just being brave. They were just courageous. But what you start to find out is they weren't just trying to be that. They were so absorbed. Their mind was absorbed in Naam. Their mind was absorbed in Vaheguru, that they didn't just know that this was temporary. They were experiencing that kirpa within them. So it wasn't just about being strong-minded. It was the practice that they had. Hanji Vaheguru. Ji. Hanji. हाँ जी, वाहिगुरु जी, yeah, हाँ जी, हाँ जी. And it's not to idealize and say, you know, everybody back then was, it's those ancestors that we're talking about that first came into Sikhi, right? That would have had the Sangat of the Guru or few generations down, where that it just wasn't on their radar. Even now, when you go to India and you talk to people, you really talk to them, you see how much more contentment that they have. You see how much, like even in the hospitals, the Bajurg will tell you straight. They'll be like, oh, this is nothing, this world is nothing. And I'm like, wow. And I'll be like, oh, have you taken? And they're like, I haven't taken Amrit, but I just know Guru will sort this out. It's within their DNA. It's just a different way of thinking. And again, ask yourselves, how has this changed for us? Is it the education system? Is it what we're consuming through these five senses constantly that is putting us in this state of doubt? You know, we need proof. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. As we ask the questions, we receive the answers. But there's this whole generation that just accepted. Both have their fal. But we're in the privilege. I got really emotional the other day, and this video, this clip of Bhai Jagraj Singh came up. And I don't listen to a lot of that gatha. And it was a big part of my journey, and I guess it just came off the radar. But it was this video where he was talking about, he was talking, and some Bajorg stood up and said, you guys have failed. And that really made me emotional, because what they were saying was that we had all these things to think about, you know, getting jobs, buying houses. They built the gurdwaras by remortgaging their houses. And we're just in fight, flight, survival mode because something that happened when I was 6 years old, right? We're in fight, flight, survival mode because we need to buy a second house to get rent, or, you know, we want to go to Dubai on holiday. So again, you know, what is it in our psyche where we have all of that opportunity? We're not about to get cut down by Mughals, right? Hopefully. Yeah. The chances, well, there was a murder in Slough, but don't want to talk about that. But the chances of us being killed or kidnapped or anything like that, very small. So why is it that we are not connecting to this? I digress. And so what is that effort that Maharaji is asking us to make? Sagal udam mein uttam pala, har ka naam japo ji sada. To chant that name. And so we're going to get into that now. As Vijay was saying at the beginning, that true self does not need to be developed and improved. The only part of us that needs to be developed and improved is the false self, the physical body, that desire for something more. What Maharaji is asking us to do is to meet ourselves, to meet our true selves, to meet Paramatma. That we are that Jyot Sarup. And so we're going to spend a bit of time now exploring what is that journey. So very quickly, this was just something that came up for me, learning about the subconscious mind, that is why we think the way that we think. And Gurbani is telling us there's panch chor are in the body. That's what's creating that kalesh, there's kam, krodh, lobh, moh, ankar. And your body is just a manifestation of what's going on in your mind. And then starting to understand, actually, there's this conscious mind. When you're present, you can start to choose what you want to do. That was happening through self-development. And Maharaj is saying, Tan mein manua, man mein sacha. Man jeete jagjeet, that conquer your mind. You can conquer your world. But more than that, within this body is that mind. And within that mind, Tan mein man Tan mein manua, man mein sacha. That such, that truth, that Vaheguru is in your mind, that you are that Jyot Sarup. So how do we go from, we all want to change to some extent, but what stops us? How many people here want to go to the gym in January, right? or, change your habits. But we fail again and again. Why? This is where self-development has helped me to understand that we have this subconscious mind. It's full of our habits. But where it didn't help me was to tell me, how do I overcome that? So I started to do a bit of mindfulness, a bit of meditation, and started to become more aware of that conscious mind. And that started to bring some change. I started to follow people like Joe Dispenza, and my body started to heal. And that was great, but it didn't take me to that contentment, to that Naam. And so I started to speak to this amazing Benji, who then started to tell me about Simran and how that science was a part. It's a rung on that ladder. Sant ka marg, taram ki pauri, kovard bagi paye. When you take that first step, you might use a little bit of self-development to understand what's going on with you, but always back it up with the Gurbani. So I'm just going to invite everybody, close your eyes for a moment. This is not to judge you. I'm going to ask some questions and then we're going to try that Simran. So close your eyes. Just put your hand up if you have a regular Nityanim practice. Take care. Put your hand up if you have a regular Simran practice. Take care. Put your hand up if you've read Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj in its entirety, whether it's English or Gurmukhi. Anji, brilliant. So you can open your eyes, and I wanted you to close your eyes so no one's judging themselves or judging each other. But there were about 3 people who have read the whole of Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. So when we haven't even investigated the whole of Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj, and then we're going outside to find solutions, what does that mean, right? Every single question that we have, the answer is in Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj, and we just haven't understood it. And so I just wanted to share that, is go to your Guru. This is what, I'm not judging anyone because this is what I was finding. I would go to Gurbani, but not always. Sometimes I'd go to Google Baba or ChatGPT Baba and ask them, and that I wasn't getting the full truth. So even if it's just in English, start that journey. How much time do we have? If we have time to do this, we have time to get on that same phone and scroll and look through Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. That is that Khoj. That is the Khoj of Gurbani. But then also apply it to your mind. Don't just read it. Think, what is Maharaj saying to me right now? So the last thing that we're going to start to wind up with and finish with is, how do we create that change? How do we connect to that Naam? And again, I'm just sharing my experience. I'm not saying I'm the authority in any way. So Maharaj is telling us, Pariya mat papa ke sang. When your mind is full of pap is that separation from Paramatma. Anything that is not about Vaheguru is a pap. Any action that is done to say, this is me and this is you, and I'm better or you're worse, that is a pap. So when your mind is stained with that mel, that dirt of separation, how can it be washed? Oh to pe na ve ke rang. Punni papi akhna nai. You can join in. Kar kar karna likh le jaho. Aape beej aape hi khaho. Nanak hukami av ho jaho. So what we're doing, kar kar karna likh le jao. What we're thinking, what we're saying, what we're feeling, how we're acting, that's going to create that likha. It's a seed. If we're thinking critically within our own mind of ourselves, we're thinking critically of other people, that's how we're going to see the world, and it becomes embedded. If we're hearing again and again, you are not enough because X, Y, Z, that's going to get embedded in the mind. We will repeat it with our mouth and we will do actions. When we realize we don't want to do that anymore, it's difficult to change that. That's what that subconscious mind stuff was about. So how do we do it? Maharaj is clear. Pariya mat papa ke sang, oh to pe na ve ke rang. When you're influenced, your thoughts are influenced by society, your thoughts are influenced by the Panchchor, or your thoughts can be influenced by Gurbani and the Sadh Sangat. So that's the first stage. Where are you spending most of your time? My husband has this habit of watching the news, and I really dislike it because I'm like, it's all negative, it's all fear and all of that. But at some point, there's been things in the world, like in COVID, for example, where people were constantly consuming it and then they were complaining, saying, I've got anxiety. So what you consume, jaisa seva, taisa hoye. What you serve with this mind is what you will become. So be aware of what you're consuming. Gurbani is going to rewire your subconscious mind. When you're reading Gurbani day in, day out, you're going to change your mindset to that of Gurbani. You're going to say, that's hukam. That's out of my hands. You're going to become more chill because you're going to realize that this is what my guru is saying. But what really changes us on a deeper level is that practice of Naam. So that's what we're going to do now. Vijay, what is the time? Anju? Okay, gone quite over, I think. Okay. How do we fulfill that true purpose of Naam? So we're going to finish off with that Simran. How does that Simran work? These thoughts that we're having in our mind is what is influencing us. Maharaj kente vichar mare tare tare. These thoughts are coming from so many sources, especially the Panchchor, that are creating fear, they're creating conflict, they're creating hate, they're creating lack. As we start to kill those thoughts, that male that is on our mind, that attachment to Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Mohankar, what you start to experience is there is that light, there is that peace, that bliss, that love that lies beneath that. This is the Gunge ki Mithiyai. This is where this is an experience that cannot be described. You need to experience it for yourself. In any situation, the problem is what you're thinking about it, not necessarily what's happening. When the Singhs went out to battle, they didn't go out from fear. They went out from hukam. That bravery, that courage didn't come from being strong. It came out because they were aligned. There was no fear there to begin with. So let's try to experience that for ourselves. I invite everybody to close your eyes. Nodar thake tavat rahaye dasave nijgar vasa paye. So first we close off those 9 doors of the body to the outside world. We close our eyes so we're not distracted. We use our tongue to chant, our mouth to chant, why, Guru. We use our ears to listen. Most people who have tried Simran and say it doesn't work for them is because they're chanting but they're not listening. Their mind is still running around. So you want to really try to listen to the sound of your voice. Tun meh dhyan, dhyan meh janaya. Tun is the sound, dhyan is your awareness. This is all a game of the mind. Once we're able to bring the mind into that presence of Paramatma, then we're able to see true from false, then we're able to experience who we are truly meant to be. So Gaviya, we're going to chant Vai Guru. Suniya, we're going to listen to the sound of our voice. Does not matter how many other thoughts you have, when you notice, bring it back again and again. Gaviya, Suniya, Manarakhiya, Pao, and chant with that love. Then Maharaj kende, Dukh par har sukh kar le jai. That's where that sukh comes from. So I'm going to chant. Please chant alongside and really try to focus on your own voice. If you want to, you can focus on the movement of your tongue for now. And there's bala in doing this. Even if you're having lots of thoughts, you get to see who you've been and how you're showing up. And as you practice more and more, that mind will start to settle. As you practice more and more, you will start to experience that sukh. So eyes closed. Relax your body. You don't want to be distracted by it. And focus on the sound. Focus on the Guru Mantra. Ao Karo Kirpa. Vai Guru. 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 Guru, Why 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 Guru, Guru, Why Guru, Why Guru, Why Guru, Why Guru, Why Guru, Guru, Why 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 Guru, Guru, Why 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 Guru. Slow it down now. Guru, Why 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 Guru. Take it down to a whisper, inhaling Wahe, exhaling Guru. And really listen, tune into the Guru Mantra. Maharaj कहते कार सुख बसया बार सुख पाया कहो नानक गुरु मंत्र दृढ़ाया. But as we embed that Guru Mantra in our mind, we experience that peace of our internal home. And as we experience that internal peace, we also experience it outside. Gar sukha vasya, bar sukha paya, koho nanak, Guru Mantra dhararaya. Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh.